this afternoon is dedicated L'Ilu Nishmas Aviva Yehudit Patra Peretz Yitzchak Allah Shalom. That's my aunt Aviva, whose yahrzeit is commemorated today. And I'd also like to dedicate this shir in the schut of Refuah Shlema for Avital Liba Bat Ilana and Bina Yael Susara Bat Ruchama, who are both recovering from surgeries, and they should have a Refuah Shlema. The past couple of weeks, we've been focusing in this session on Modern Masters, specifically about Chanukah, and we're going to be continuing to discuss Chanukah this afternoon as well. And today I want to begin with a short passage that's not on your sheets, actually, from Sefer TORAH. Sefer TORAH is a very, very important 20th century work on Jewish practice, authored by Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov. Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov, who was born in Poland in 1912, came on Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael in 1938. His birth name was Avraham Eliyahu Makotov, which became Hebraicized to Kitov. And he becomes, when he makes Aliyah, becomes obviously involved in education, becomes a very prolific author and teacher. His father was a very close chassid, the great Hasidic master, Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin. And Tzadok continues to influence his worldview and his hashkafa and his writings. So we're just gonna learn from a small passage from Sefer TORAH, which is a very, very important work that Rabbi Kitov authored, which deals with the Jewish calendar and the practices and minhagim of the Jewish people. And there he writes regarding Chanukah something very interesting. And it's an idea that we actually introduced the past couple of weeks, but he says it in such a very clear and profound way. V'chein haya minhag b'harbe kilot Yisrael shebimei Chanukah shakatu al chinuch habanim. That the practice in so many communities amongst the Jewish people is that these days of Chanukah were specifically used to emphasize and place great attention to the chinuch lebanim, to how we educate our children. Ki Chanukah milashon chinuch, because the word Chanukah, as we discussed last week, comes from the word chinuch, which means to learn and prepare and to ready ourselves. Okay, and therefore, ikaro shel chinuch hu chinuch habanim l'Torah. And the most important principle of chinuch is what? Is to prepare our children to learn Torah and to teach our children Torah. Okay, now he doesn't stop there, and then he continues, and this is where we're going to get into our topic for today. Hargel zesh nefotz ben yaldei Yisrael l'sachek b'Chanukah b'mischach Hasivivon af hu minyan shel chinuch v'Chanukah. He says the practice or the custom, the widespread tradition that many, many children on Chanukah play with a Hasivivon, with the dreidel. He says this is also related to this idea of Chanukah as a time of chinuch, of teaching, of education, and preparing our children. Okay, and why? Because even now, when our children are playing, okay, when they play with that dreidel, they're being reminded what? Not to forget the miraculous events that Hashem has done for our ancestors and continues to do for each one of us. V'charutem al sivivoneim et ha'otiot nun gimel hei pei kilomar nes gadol hayapo. And we know that inscribed on each of the dreidels are the four letters, either nun gimel hei pei or nun gimel hei shin nes gadol hayapo, or b'chutz haaretz nun gimel hei shin. He says kilomar nes gadol hayasham or po v'akol shelo yisichu atinokot da'ata min hanes hazeh. Afilu b'shat mischakikehem. In order what? That we this idea that Chanukah is a time when we recall and show our appreciation for miraculous events, that this should not leave the attention, should not leave the focus of our children, even when they're playing. And that's where the game of playing with the dreidel comes in. It's not, many of us know the story that supposedly that it was meant that during the times of the decrees that the Greeks made against teaching Torah, that this is a way for us to for the Malam de Torah to go out into the woods and play, have what seems like a play group when really they're teaching Torah. But says Rabbi Kitov, no, that there's a deeper reason. And there's a reason why it became such a widespread practice today, and that is that what? That Chanukah is all about chinuch, and we want to maximize every opportunity there is to teach our children about the miraculous events that Hashem has done for the Jewish people throughout our history. And therefore, even on Chanukah, when they're, and often Chanukah kids are off from school at least part of the time, that even when they're having fun and playing, we remind them what? Don't forget what this day is all about. It's all about remembering the miracles that Hashem has provided. So that's a beautiful idea. However, as we're going to see together and over the next few moments this afternoon, the Hasidic masters suggest that the dreidel and this practice of playing dreidel is not simple child's play, but rather, if you want to say, encrypted within this game is deep significance, spiritual significance. And we're going to learn from a number of Hasidic masters together today, this afternoon, to help us unpack the hidden messages, the secrets of the dreidel. So now we're going to start on our sheet. So we're going to start with the first text, Aleph. You need a source here. There you go. You're welcome. You have one? Okay. So we're going to start with the first text. Okay, text Aleph on our sheets. Minag Yisrael Sachek Hasivivon Zair Sh'alav Chanukah Ta'otiot Gimel Shin Nun Hey Shehen Roshei Tevo Nes Gadol Hayasham L'Persume Nisa. So he says, we know that there's a very long and well-established minhag, what? To play with a dreidel, a small little dreidel on Chanukah that has engraved on its sides the letters Gimel, Shin, Nun, Hey, that stand for the words Nes Gadol Hayasham, a great miracle happened there, L'Persume Nisa, in order what? To publicize the miracle. So we're learning from text Aleph, we're learning from the Vishitza Rebbe, the Damascus Eliezer, who came on Aliyah in 1944. He was born in 1891, came on Aliyah from Poland in 1944, and lived in Tel Aviv for the last 2 years of his life. He passed away in 1946. So the Damascus Eliezer tells us what we're already familiar with, that there's a long-standing tradition, Jewish tradition, to play with a dreidel, a small little dreidel that has engraved on it the letters Nes Gadol for Nes Gadol Hayasham, as a manifestation of the idea of publicizing the miracles of Chanukah.
Where's his resting place?
What's that?
Where's his resting
I don't know. Vadavar Timva. And this idea is puzzling, says the Rebbe. Listen to what the Damascus Eliezer says. Klum lo haya adif lirshom amilim elu al shalatim gdolim meirei einayim l'tlotam b'roshei chutzot kedei lefarsem et hanes b'terseit. Wouldn't it make more sense if the idea of playing with the dreidel and engraving the dreidel with those letters, Nes Gadol Hayasham, is what? To remind us and publicize the miracle. Wouldn't it make more sense to what? To write those words on a big billboard somewhere where everyone can see them. What is this business of engraving them on a small little toy? So this is what he says. Elamikan, but rather we learn through the fact that we don't do that, but rather we do it on the dreidel. What do we learn? Shemutav she'asivivon za'ir v'otiotav b'roshei tevot b'vad sh'istovei v'yifal al pnei shalat anak hataloi b'kapaon. We learn, obviously, what? That it must be preferred, that it's inscribed, that those letters and that message is inscribed on a small little dreidel, a little toy, rather than put them on a very big billboard. Why? Listen to what his words are. To remind us that just as the dreidel spins around, okay, and we never know how it's going to fall, how long it's going to spin for, just as that dreidel spins around and it seems random to us, ultimately Hashem knows when that dreidel is going to start spinning and what letter it's going to fall on. So too, the dreidel reminds us that when things are moving in the world, what? that's when there's the opportunities to experience miracles. Okay, not to stand on our laurels, not to stay, stuck in the status quo, not to just put up a statement on a sign that doesn't move and that's the status quo, but rather be reminded that the world is an active place, and that miracles are coming down into the world constantly. We just have to be open to see it. And that's what the dreidel, the spinning, reminds us. The spinning reminds us what? That don't get stuck in the status quo. A Jew never is satisfied with the status quo. We're constantly spinning and moving forward. And in so doing, we're able to recognize and hopefully experience the miracles that Hashem is bringing down to this world every single moment. So that's a beautiful idea from the domestic Eliezer. Yeah, we have to keep it spinning, right? So that's the domestic Eliezer. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who everyone here I'm sure has heard of. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov actually has a very different bent on this. And Rabbi Nachman says that the dreidel is meant to teach us a very fundamental concept related to Chanukah. So let's take a look at Rabbi Nachman's words. This is text number bet on our sheets. What is the idea that's represented when we play with the dreidel on Chanukah? Ki Chanukah hu b'chinat haBeit HaMikdash. What is Chanukah meant to remind us, and what is Chanukah really all about? The Beis HaMikdash and the centrality of the Beis HaMikdash in Jewish life. Okay, and therefore, we can get caught up in the donuts, we can get caught up in the latkes, we can get caught up in the miracle of the shemen, but ultimately, Chanukah is about the Beis HaMikdash. And just as a side note, I know we're talking about the dreidel, but Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, so he writes that one of the reasons why we have the custom to eat donuts on Chanukah must associated with the Nes Pach Hashem and the miracle of the oil. Just like we eat latkes, those of us that ate latkes before we came in Aliyah, that we eat donuts. So no, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says no, it's actually a deeper meaning behind the donuts. What's the deeper meaning? That what is a donut? A donut is essentially, it's flour and oil, okay? Which were the primary components of the carbon mincha. Carbon mincha was the carbon that was offered in the late afternoon, okay, in the Beis HaMikdash, okay, and when the time when the menorah would have been kindled daily by the Kohanim. But what happened in the Beis HaMikdash in the story of the Chashmonaim? What happened? They were able to come in and they were able to find that little bit cruise of oil, and they were able to light the menorah. And everyone knows that we recall that miracle and the importance of the menorah through lighting our candles. But Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, if you look closely at the Chanukah story, it took them a year. It took the Chashmonaim a year until they were able to rededicate the Mizbeach, where the various karbanos were able to be offered. Okay, the Mizbeach had to be constructed in a very specific way. It took them a year until they had a Chanukat Mizbeach. And therefore, says Rosh Hashanah Auerbach, we eat donuts, which represent the carbon mincha, okay, to remind us that it's not just, we don't just celebrate Hanukkah that we were able to light the menorah, but we don't lose sight of the end of the story, okay, which is the rededication of the Mizbeach, which allowed us to offer once again the carbon mincha, all those menachos, which was represented by the donuts. But then he takes it a step further and he says, when you eat a donut, unlike a laka, the bracha achrona on a laka is b'rei nefasha. Okay, the bracha achrona on a donut is ala michya. And what's the difference between ala michya and b'rei nefashot and even birkat hamazon? That in addition to recalling Yerushalayim as part of the bracha, we also say the words, okay, v'al mizbachecha v'aichalecha, that we recall the mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash, not just Yerushalayim, but specifically the mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, when we eat donuts on Chanukah, says the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, okay, we're reminded not only of the fact of the carbon mincha and the fact that the mizbeach, we weren't able to offer those karbanos on the mizbeach, but we're reminded of the centrality of the Beis HaMikdash to the whole story and the centrality of offering karbanos. And therefore, when we eat that donut, we're able to say that bracha, okay, which reminds us of the centrality of both the Beis Hamikdash and the Mizbeach. Okay, so now back to what. So Rabbi Nachman in this first sentence, that's all a tangent from this first line from Rabbi Nachman. Sorry, Rabbi Nachman in his first sentence says that Chanukah is all about the Beis Hamikdash. The Iker binyan Beit Hamikdash b'china nisker le'el b'china galgel hachozer. And he says the essential idea of building the Beis Hamikdash is a concept that he says we described before, meaning in his other writings, of a spinning wheel. Now he's going to explain this, right? A dreidel spins around like a spinning wheel, right? Ki Beit Hamikdash haya bechinat elyonim lemata v'tachtonim lemala. Listen to this beautiful idea. Rabbi Nachman says in the Beis Hamikdash, what happened in the Beis Hamikdash? It was a blending together of worlds. You have the upper worlds, the heavens, so to speak, descended and blended with what was going on down here on earth, and the lower world, the earthly realm, there was an ascension where a blending together between heaven and earth. Because intellectually, this is a very, very, very difficult concept for us to grasp. Shashem yibarach shehu miromem umnosei lamala mikol ruchaniot yeh mitzamtzem shchinato b'chlei hamishkan. Okay, that Hashem that has no physical form, that's beyond, larger than any physical capacity, that He could contract Himself, so to speak, so His presence could be present within the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash. Because we know that Hashem's presence did rest in the Beis Hamikdash. V'chein lehefach, hu davar rechok al pi chakira, she'adam shu beri hashfela, yeh lo koach la'asot roshem lamala. And the other thing that's beyond human intellectual comprehension is what? That a human being that is a small, a very tiny creature in comparison to the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that a simple human being, a humble human being, could what? Could have an impact on what's decided in the heavens. That's also beyond our comprehension. Okay? Obehema shvela. Yiyu makrivin otah lekarban sheta'aleh lerech nichoach lenachat ruach lefanech yibach. Or that a small animal, okay? That an animal would become something that we would offer as a korban, would become something that would be pleasing to Hashem Yibarach. All these things are beyond our human comprehension, right? Aval be'emet, hara Hashem Yibarach lehefach midatam. Hashem reveals to us what? The opposite of our human intuition and nature. Ki be'emet Hashem Yibarach hashra shchinato lamata b'mishkan u'beit hamikdash, because Hashem did place His presence down here on earth in both the Mishkan and in the Beis Hamikdash. Ubehema alta l'reich nichoach, and the karbanos that we offered in the Beis Hamikdash went up and they were pleasing to Hashem. V'zeh bechinat elyonim lamata v'tachtonim lamala. This is this idea of the blending together of the heavens and the earth. Bechinat galgel chazer. The idea of the spinning wheel. Bechinat dreidel. This is what the dreidel represents, says Rabbi Nachman Mibreslev. Okay. So the dreidel, just to sum up Rabbi Nachman, the dreidel represents what? The blending together of heaven and earth. Okay, the blending of perspectives. And this idea is built on even further in the next piece, okay? Rabbi Shimon Gershon Rosenberg, Zichron Livracha, Zatzal, Zechatzar Kosh Livracha. Rabbi Shimon Gershon Rosenberg, known as Rabbi Arav Shagar. Rav Shagar was a great Rosh Yeshiva and philosopher and thinker, theologian. In the end of the 20th century, he died in the beginning of the 21st century. He was at one point one of the Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshivat HaKotel in the Ir Atikah in the Old City. He also was one amongst the founders of the Yeshiva Hesder Otniel in Otniel. He also founded his own yeshiva, known as Siach Yitzchak, which continues to exist in Efrat. And Rav Shagar is going to actually take this idea from Rabbi Nachman a step further, and he's going to point to the words of the Baal HaTanya, the first Rebbe of Chabad. Okay, Veshu B'Lashonosh, Rabbi Shimon Gershon Rosenberg. Okay, Veshu B'Lashonosh Admar Zakim B'Drashatav L'Chanukah. We're going to return once again to the words of the Baal HaTanya in his drasha for Chanukah. Shamayim v'aretz, heaven and earth, Ruchaniot v'gashmiot, spirituality and physicality. Hakol shaveh lefanav yiparach. Hashoveh u'mishaveh katav v'gadol. Everything is equal and one in the eyes of Hashem, the one who equalizes all, everything that exists, everything that's large, everything that is small. Okay? Beit HaMikdash hu noseh avchim. And listen to what Rosh Hagar does with this line from the Baal HaTanya. He says, the Beis HaMikdash is all about what? Opposites. It represents opposites. What does that mean? Kilomar makom asher chosef et choser avdel ben chomer leruach. It's a place that revealed the true lack of differentiation between that which is physical and that which is spiritual. Ben adam lemalach. That there's really no difference in a human being and a malach and an angel. Ben mata lemala, between earth and heaven. Havdilim im yeshnam hem b'chinat teinu. Okay, if there are differences, okay, in existence, within existence, it's from our human perspective. They come as a result of what? Of our reality that we live through here in this realm. But from the universal perspective, meaning from whose perspective? From Hashem's perspective, right? So from the divine perspective, there's no real separation. And this is what we learn. This is what's represented, and that we learn through playing with the dreidel on Chanukah. Hasivivon mistovev sachor v'sachor v'nofel pam outside zeh and pam outside acher. The dreidel spins around and around and around, and sometimes it lands on one side, and sometimes it lands on another side. The reality is that no matter which side it lands on, it's still the same dreidel, the great oneness. The dreidel represents the great oneness and reminds us that even though we as human beings don't have the capacity to see the entire picture, it reminds us and teaches us what? To take a step back and acknowledge that things are not exactly as we see them based on our own limited human perspective. If we can just take a step back and embrace this concept that there's something bigger beyond our comprehension. My great teacher, Rabbi David Aaron, he used a beautiful mashal to kind of teach this concept. If someone goes into an art museum, okay, and you walk into an art museum and you see this beautiful canvas on the wall, and you take a look at this canvas from a distance where you can see the whole canvas, and it's gorgeous, and it's a masterpiece, and everyone agrees it's a masterpiece. But if a person was to walk closer to that canvas, that tapestry, and put your face literally against that tapestry, what would you see? You'd see a bunch of random squiggly lines, okay, and a bunch of ugly blotches of paint that make no sense. Okay, because it's right in front of our face. It's only when we take a step back and we begin to slowly take in the entire picture and see the whole tapestry that we realize, wow, this is a masterpiece. That which looks ugly and confusing is really a masterpiece. And that's such a mussar for us. Okay, we look at the world from our limited human perspective and we see what? We see the ugliness. We see the confusion. We experience it. We have to take a step back and see the big picture and recognize that from Hashem's perspective, it's all one. And that, says Rav Shagar, based on this beautiful teaching from the Baal HaTanya, is also one of the messages we're meant to glean and learn from the spinning around of the dreidel. Okay. We're now going to review an idea that we touched on in last week's shir. And this is a short teaching, or a couple of short teachings from Reb Pinchas Mikoretz, one of the first generation Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, and the Reb Pinchas Mikoretz is actually going to quote the Baal Shem Tov here in this piece as well. Who's the Rav? If he's the student of the Baal Shem Tov, he's talking about the Baal Shem Tov. He says, the idea, why do we engrave on the dreidel those four letters, Nun, Gimel, Hey, and Shin? Again, there's no pay here, right? Shin. Okay, the Baal Shem Tov taught us, he says, Shehu Merames al kol mitzvot shehem b'Chanukah, that those letters are meant to what? Remind us of all the mitzvos associated with Chanukah. What are the mitzvos? Hainu hadlaka v'amirat halel. There are two mitzvos associated with Chanukah. That is what? Lighting the candles and reciting Hallel. V'zeh nun shin. Nun shin, the letters nun and shin refer to what? Nerot shmona, that there are 8 candles that we light. Hey Gimel, Hallel Gamor. The letters Hey and Gimel teach us what? That we recite the whole Hallel throughout the entire 8 days of Hanukkah. V'amahu Nero Yahir, and he continued to say in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, Kevan Sheminag Yisrael Torah Kashem Sheyesh Shivim Panim LaTorah, Kach Yesh Shivim Panim LaMinhagim. We know that we have this, that the minhagim of the Jewish people are considered sacred, like the Torah, and that there's 70 perspectives to understanding the Torah, says Reb Pinchas HaKaretz, that he learned from the Baal Shem Tov. That must mean what? That there are 70 ways to analyze and explain every single minhag, every single custom of the Jewish people as well. And therefore, v'nir li remez lezeh. And he says, and therefore I came to understand an example of this, okay? Shekol anisim by mehechal Mashiach. That all, we learn from the Baal Shem Tov, that all the nisim, okay, that come into existence, they come from the realm of Mashiach. Meaning, every miraculous event that happens to the Jewish people, okay, is somehow contributing to what? To bringing Mashiach closer. Okay? The Gam b'Chanukah, Yored or Shel Mashiach. And so too on Chanukah, if we're celebrating a miracle, that means that what? The Chanukah is somehow bringing us closer to Mashiach. And Chanukah is meant to remind us about this idea of longing for Mashiach, as we discussed last week. Okay? V'zel ha-remesh shal daled otiyot b'gematria Mashiach. And that's why these 4 letters, Nun, Gimel, Shin, and Hey, okay, are the ones that are inscribed on the dreidel. Why? Because Nun and Gimel, Hey and Shin add up to an equal in gematria to Mashiach. Okay, do the math. Okay, Chet is what? Is 5 plus 3, right? So you have a Hey and a Gimel is the Chet, right? What's Mem? Mem is what? How much is Mem? What? Right. You can do the Mashiach. You can do the math. Okay, that the Neis Gadol Hayasham is equal to the Shin is in both of them, right? Both Mashiach and here, and it's equal in gematria. Anyways, says the Imre Pinchas in the name of the Baal Shem Tov that the dreidel contains encrypted. Those letters remind us of 2 different messages. Number 1, the 2 mitzvos associated with Chanukah of the Nerot Shmona, the 8 candles, the 8 days of candles, and Hallel Gamor, the complete Hallel, and also this idea of Mashiach. And it's very interesting. There's a story. This is text number Hey on our sheets. There's a story that's told of the Belzer Rebbe. It is reported that when Rabbi Aaron Rokach, the Belzer Rebbe, moved to Israel, there were no dreidels available with the letters Nun, Gimel, Hey, Shin, because in Israel it is traditional to use a pei instead of the shin for the word po, right? He sent the shamash to search for a dreidel with a shin and commented that one should not change the letter to pei. Presumably, this is due to the gematria connection to Mashiach. So, similarly, the dreidel, another message that seems to be consistent amongst numerous Hasidic masters is that the dreidel is meant to remind us that Chanukah and the miracles associated with Chanukah are meant to be bringing us closer to the light of Mashiach. So I want to just learn one last text together to bring all this together. And this is a beautiful, beautiful teaching, or a couple of teachings, from the Sefer Tiva Sichot L'Chanukah of Rav Gamliel Rabinovich Shalita. Rav Gamliel Rabinovich is one of the great Yerushalmi Hasidic Mikubalim alive today. He lives in the Yismach, I think it's called Yismach Moshe neighborhood of which is right near Geula in Yerushalayim. And listen to what Zichron Moshe, right? Not Yismach Moshe. Zichron Moshe neighborhood. Thank you, of Geula. And listen to what he says about the dreidel. I think that this opening sentence in particular is very relevant for us today.
What's the sign again?
Rav Gamliel Rabinovich. Look what he says in this opening sentence because it's particularly relevant for us today. V'zeh tam l'minhag Yisrael Torah. Okay, we know that I want to explain to you the reason for this minhag Yisrael that's as sacred as the Torah. And listen to what he says here in parentheses. B'chol hamilchamot v'akufot hakashot bikshu tzadikim l'kayem minhag zeh b'chiruf nefesh. He says in all times of war and difficulties to the Jewish people, that tzaddikim throughout generations have asked and requested to do this practice, do this custom with great fervor, religious fervor. And what's the custom he's talking about? To play on the days of Chanukah, to spin the top. So it's not child's play. Okay, it says Rav Gamliel, one of the greatest Mekubalim alive today. He says that throughout our history, in the most difficult moments in wartime, and all the difficult moments the Jewish people have faced, the tzaddikim of every era have encouraged us to play with the dreidel with religious fervor and enthusiasm. B'chiruv nefesh. L'sovei b'mei HaChanukah b'sivivon. To play during the days of Chanukah with the Sivivon. Ki yesh bazeh kedei le'orer et ha'machshava be'inyan hashgacha elyona. Because what does it do when we do that? It's meant to remind us that there's something above us and that there's an ultimate judge that will bring salvation to the Jewish people. Sharei Hasivivon hazeh ein lo tkuma v'amida milmata. Okay, the Sivivon can't stand on its own. Rak im esovim mioto milmala. It can only stand up and begin to spin if what? If it's being held up and spun around from above. L'rameis ki gam im nidme la'adam she'en lo shum tkuma afiu apiderach hateva u'vadai yipol ba'od rega harei achozet b'yad yemini u'milamala mesovim oto al atzad atov bioter ve'en shum teva ba'olam klal rak yad hashgacha hi hamesovevet et sivivon chayenu b'hashgacha pratit medukdeket u'mechoshevet b'chesed u'v'rachamim. Wow, says Rav Gamliel. The dreidel reminds us that even when we feel downtrodden, even when we feel we're in the lowest space we could possibly be, when we spin that dreidel, we're reminded that what? That Hashem is there and Hashem will pick us up. Hashem will spin us and move us forward, propel us forward, will bring us salvation. It's Hashem who's kind of steering our lives, he says. It's Hashem who steers our lives and spins us forward with great compassion and love. V'chach masbir Magad HaMesharim Hagon HaTzadik Rabbi Elimelech Biderman Shlita. And now he's going to bring a teaching from Rabbi Elimelech Biderman. Rabbi Elimelech Biderman is another great Hasidic teacher in the world today. He's descended and connected to the Hasidic dynasty of Lelov, and he is a very, very charismatic and popular teacher in the Hasidic world today. And Rabbi Biderman, he says, explains this idea of the dreidel as follows: Ki kashem shekol echad mevin, that just as every single one of us understands, shelagabe atotzaah en shum hevdel eich misovavim et hasivivon im beroga u'b'shalva or bekoach u'bechozek, okay, u'bechol hamemtzaim. Ki l'olam kasher yista'em hasivuv yipol ha'tzad shenikba min hashamayim v'kach yakum v'yiyeh. So it doesn't matter. We all know the reality is it doesn't matter how hard we spin the dreidel, whether we spin it gently and softly, or whether we spin it with great, great power. Ultimately, the dreidel is going to fall on the side that's determined by Hashem above us. Hashem knows exactly how that dreidel is going to fall and which side the dreidel is going to come up on. And he says, so too, Kach kol hitnahalut chayinu. So to all aspects of our lives, says Rabbi Elimelech Biderman, whether it be in terms of shiduchim, in marriage partners, whether it's in terms of livelihood, whether it's in terms of health, okay, in every realm and aspect of our lives, Yes, it's true. We have to what? Put in some minimal effort and make ourselves a kli, a vessel to receive the blessings from above. Ach ein shum to'elet v'tamsut od va'od b'sivuv nosaf u'bepalat kochot u'mochot. But the reality is what? Ultimately, doesn't matter how many times we spin ourselves around, how hard we try. As long as we make some effort, ultimately, what's the message? Tamid yikva libsof rak masha nigzar milamala. The reality is that we're always left with only that which has already been decreed from above, says Rav Eli Mach Bitterman. V'hi ratzon sheniska. Now, the closing words of Rav Gamliel Rabinovich's words. Okay, v'hi ratzon sheniska lirot b'Yeshuat Hashem u'b'nisim agluim kishem shena'asu avotenu b'yamim hahem b'zman hazeh amen. And Rav Gamliel closes with these beautiful words: may we merit to experience the miracles, just as Hashem brought miracles for our ancestors in their days, may we also merit to see those miracles in our days. So, my friends, from what we learn from all these beautiful ideas is that the dreidel is not simply child's play. The dreidel represents powerful imagery in terms of, and reminds us of many, many fundamental ideas associated with Chanukah, as well as with Jewish life in general. And therefore, I encourage all of us, if we take Reb Gamliel's message at the end, at the beginning of his teaching, that during times of difficulty and war throughout Jewish history, that tzaddikim encourage us to play dreidel with great fervor. So I can tell you that Rav Gamliel, every year, my brother-in-law, who's a videographer, he is invited. Every year, there's a chassid of Rav Gamliel that records one night of the lighting Hanukkah candles by Rav Gamliel's house. And every year, my brother-in-law goes. He never works because I always have an event. I always want to go with him. But he did bring me a dime once from the Chanukah gelt that Rav Gamliel gives out. It's an American dime. I have it. It's like saved. Anyways, so he every year when he lights the candles, people sit around afterwards, and he takes out like a dozen silver and gold dreidels, and he sits with incredible kavana. I can send you a video of it actually because I have it. Incredible kavana. He spins the dreidels and spins another dreidel, spins another, and he's like clapping, and he's incredible kavana because of this message that the dreidel represents what? Some kind of shmira or Yeshua, even in the most difficult of moments. So I bless us all. Let's play with our dreidels this Hanukkah. Let's bring the Yeshua that we need for Klal Yisrael, and let's be blessed to experience miracles by not only recall the miracles that occurred for the Chashmonayim, but let's be blessed to experience miracles in our days, in the days ahead. Chag Sameach.
All right, what's the schedule for that?